Okay, this is Lee the Appraiser for another segment of Amazing Appraising. We've been talking about the strong market in baseball cards and sports cards, the $12.5 million Mickey Mantle rookie card that was sold recently, for which we have another example here for sale. You can buy it outright with no crazy auction commissions. We were talking about this beautiful sort of Christmas and New Year's card, a little larger than a regular card, that was signed by Prince Philip and Queen Elizabeth in 1960, almost 75 years ago. One of the most gorgeous photographs and signed cards that we have ever seen. We were talking about a very rare 1978 New York Yankee painted team photograph, portrait that was extremely rare, that is signed, that they made a very small group of limited edition prints and lithographs signed by the entire team. So we have that somewhere in our gallery, and we just told you somebody contacted us and they have the original one-of-a-kind painting that was used for that lithograph. Okay? All right. Okay, so we're going to talk now about several watches that we have available, okay, or that we've seen here. This is an incredibly rare and beautiful Rolex wristwatch. It's their Oyster Perpetual. What's very rare about this watch, if you look closely, is two things. Okay, the face is usual. It's one of their brand new models they made, I think, just a couple years ago. It's got the silver, what they call rhodium dial, the Oyster Perpetual movement, the extra large case. But what makes this watch stand out is twofold. Is if you look a little further down on the second link of the bracelet, it has two dice. Is that clear there? A 1 and a 2. Mr. Molly, you know what that means?
No.
Okay. If I told you that's a symbol for one of the largest fast food chains in the world, what would you say?
Domino's.
Domino's Pizza. You got it right on the button. And while you're doing that and showing the audience that engraving, why don't you turn it around? Let me open up the bracelet. And you can also show them, it has to be shown very carefully, the back of the case. You'll see Domino's engraving lightly placed there as well. Pretty cool. So this is a case where Domino's Pizza probably had a long-term contract with Rolex, where they gave out several watches to several of their top executives over the course of a number of years. So Domino's probably signed this as a revolving contract maybe 15, 20 years ago, that every year they would buy a few of these Rolexes that Rolex would agree to custom make them to their discretion. Well, but I mean, it was agreed what they were going to do. They were going to put on the engraving on the bracelet of the two dominoes, or the two symbols 1 and 2, and engrave the back of the case. So this is so cool, because Rolex typically is a very multi-billion-dollar company that typically does not agree to any customized work for anybody. And that stems from its big fight. That was actually a notorious fight that it had with the largest jewelry retailer in the world, Tiffany's, about 25 years ago. Tiffany's has a policy that every item in their store, not only watches or jewelry, but anything they sell is uniquely sold only by Tiffany's. That means they will not allow to sell a product in their store that is agreed to be sold anywhere else in anyone else's store. They don't want to have any competition where somebody can say, ooh, I bought this piece of jewelry, this watch at Cartier, at Bon Mercier, at any other high-end jeweler or retailer. They want every item that they sell to be exclusively to Tiffany's. Okay, so the question is, how could they do that with watches? For example, Tiffany's used to sell Baume Mercier watches, or even Patek Philippe watches for that matter. So how could Patek Philippe, they're not going to make watches strictly styles that are only sold at Tiffany's. That doesn't make sense. I mean, they want to, if they're going to go to the trouble, it costs them millions of dollars of an investment to design and manufacture a specific style watch. They're not going to make it exclusively to one store to sell it. So the answer to that question is Baume and Mercier would make a certain brand, and Tiffany would request, and typically the manufacturer would concede to make. So if they're making a specific model of Patek Philippe, Tiffany's is going to ask Patek, or in this case demand it in a nice way, to ask Patek to put Tiffany's name on the dial in addition to what Patek Philippe's name. So when Patek will manufacture a watch, they typically, the dials are made separately, so they'll agree to stamp Tiffany's name on it. When they stamp Patek's name, they'll stamp Tiffany's name on it as well. So that is called what we call co-branding, that it has an additional name of the retailer on the watch, typically with the manufacturer's name. So we have one of the nicest collections of those types of watches. For example, we have a tray of Tiffany watches here in the gallery that we may have maybe 30 different watches manufactured by Tiffany with a co-branded name. Some are vintage, most of them are all vintage. We have Baume Mercier, we have some Patek Philippe's that are great rarities. In fact, they sold at an auction recently, about a year and a half ago. Patek, just at that time, Tiffany's was being sold to Mr. Arnault, the French billionaire, who purchased Tiffany's he's the big retail owner conglomeration man, and he bought Tiffany's for almost $17 billion. So when he bought them, Patek decided that Tiffany's has been their partner in selling high-end watches for almost, I think it was 150 years. So Patek agreed to commemorate that event of their long-standing relationship with Tiffany's to take one of their most popular contemporary watch designs they've ever made. It was called the Patek Philippe Nautilus, which is a sort of a square-shaped watch that is a combination of a dress but primarily sport, and Patek makes very few sport watches. It's a very classic design, and Patek agreed to make that, to release 160 examples of that watch with a special Tiffany aqua blue dial, the famous light blue color, the turquoise dial that Tiffany is known for. So they issued a limited number of these watches with the Tiffany dial, and they put their Patek's name on it, and they also put Tiffany and Company on it. So I think the very first one that was released to the public that came from Tiffany's purportedly sold at a rare collectible auction about a year and a half ago, and it brought an astonishing price. Again, the watch, I think, retails. That means it has a suggested retail selling price. If you went to Tiffany's would not be able to charge over the retail price, because that is the law, the rule with the retailers, that the retailers are not allowed to consider charging market price, but only what the suggested retail is. That's a strict rule in the watch retailing business. So purportedly it was sold at a charity auction, and it brought close to $7 million for a watch that had a retail value of only, I think, $70,000. So, wow, so 10 times the 700. So it brought around 100 times its retail price. And you're talking about a lot of money. And supposedly the rumor has it that Jay-Z, the famous singer, was the purchaser of the specific watch. So it's very rare for watchmakers to make watches, especially Rolex. They're such a independent and strong company. They typically will not change their general rules for anybody. So for them to have, and for us to have, a watch where they manufactured specifically for, out of all places, not the highest end retail in the world like Tiffany's, but Domino's Pizza, that you have a watch here that was custom made for Domino's by Rolex with two major symbols on it is of Domino's Pizza, two major trademarks, is very unusual and very cool and very much in demand. So if you have any Rolex watches, Rolex styles, anything relating to Rolex boxes, certificates, paperwork, any clocks, anything with Rolex, we collect them, and we pay a lot of money for them and appraise them for a lot of money. So if you have anything, let us know. We'll be happy to look at them, view them, appraise them, and give you a great appraisal and a great offer that we guarantee you will be very, very happy with, okay? We also can refurbish, clean, service, and repair and replace any watch that you need servicing or replacing, okay? We're gonna take another break for just a second and then come back with two other very unique watches and some other collectibles. We'll be right back after this very brief message.